Welcome to Veterans Counseling Veterans Podcast, Veteran Suicide, the Local Solution. Tonight's episode 14 is Suicide and Active Duty. And here's your host, Tony Williams. Welcome to Veterans Counseling Veterans Podcast. It's called Veteran Suicide, the Local Solution. This episode 14 is something that I think is that we want to discuss because we don't hear much about it. In September of 2019, DOD released a report about the increase of suicides for active duty in the military. And then since then, we really didn't hear much about it. But I want to circle back because I don't want us to forget about it. I know with all this COVID-19 going on, and we got the racial tension as well as the MSC with Specialist Gillen, that we kind of forget about this. But suicide is still happening at an alarming rate. In fact, we have seen such an increase in suicide that the Army has increased to 29%. The Marines have increased up to 31%, or 31, not 30%, 31 per 100,000. So there's an increase in what's really going on. And to answer this question, what I've done is I've got a couple people of our tribe to kind of answer this question. First, I have Master Sergeant, in this case here, Tom Cruise. He's active duty, and he has a tremendous amount of experience when it comes to suicide and all of the, and he's like what I call a military influencer when it comes to suicide. So he's a great wealth of information, and we'll learn from him as far as what is going on in active duty. We also have Lakita Houston. As you know, she's one of the tribe. So is Tom. We're part of the tribe. And Lakita Houston also in the Air Force. She's responsible for Central Texas and recruiting, and she has a lot of experience when it comes what's going on with suicide with active duty. And finally, but not least, we have Enrique Acosta Gonzalez. Now he's spent about 26 years in the Navy. He spent 20 of those years in the Casualty Assistance Call Office, which we're responsible for whenever somebody dies, be it suicide or killing action. But he's seen a lot of suicide. So he's a guy or the agency that actually is the one, once the person's been identified as suicide, then it's his show. And what I've learned just recently with Enrique, he recently also had almost 6 or 7 years as a suicide prevention coordinator. So he's really has a lot of experience. And we want to start to have a real good, honest, authentic conversation when it comes to suicide and the active duty side of the house. But first thing I want to do is try to lay the groundwork on what actually happens if a veteran thinks about having suicide ideation. And I like Sergeant. I'm sorry. I would like Tom Cruise, because he's not here as an active duty person. Here is Tom Cruise. I like Tom to kind of lay that out from soup until we get to the post-vention side. And after that, then Enrique will pick it up. So Tom, give us kind of how this thing unfolds.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Glad to be on here. As he said, Master Sergeant Tom Cruise, stationed out here in Belgium. So I'm 6 hours ahead of you. It's already midnight. I have been in 26 years, and I actually attempted suicide 10 years ago this year. And the process is very different within the military, right? For the most part, most of the people that within my rank and lower, they usually just go get some help and then usually get filtered out. But for me, I have one of the positive stories in this, and this is why I continue to do this as my mission. I was able to go through every process that Walter Reed had, went through tons of medications, but I was also able to fight through and stay in the military instead of getting chaptered out. So when I did come in, I did have a unit that I was associated with at that time. And my background is very diverse in both the spec ops side and the regular Army side. And that prior unit did try to, have me taken out of the military. But luckily, fortunately, when I did come out of the hospital, I did have a unit that cared for me. And I think that is huge when we talk about this is the ability to have a leadership that cares. I had a leadership that did not care. They tried to ruin my career. And then my one that did pick me up did care. And as you can see, it helped me with my career where I am now. I think it has somewhat held me back a little bit, but that's later on in the story. So yes, also my job requires me to have a TSSCI clearance. Without that, I don't have a job. And so then not only did I have to fight to stay in the military, I then had to fight a whole nother realm, which is keeping my clearance. And the surprising part for that was I didn't have a major role in any of that. A lot of everything I did was on my personal side. I went to PTSD groups. I went to anger groups. I went to anything to try to figure out what I can do to make myself better and not, I'm always going to have these ideations and always have these thoughts and depression, anxiety, PTSD, everything that they say I have, but I'm not letting it hold me back. Right. And so DOD CAF, which is the guys that govern our clearances, saw that I was not only fought my way out of the, out of the clinic to be able to stay in the military. I had a supporting unit. They also saw the programs and the eagerness that I had to stay in. And basically what they did is they suspended put me on like a suspension or not a suspension, but they like a probation. They said, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Don't screw up in the next year and you'll keep your clearance. So I kept my nose clean, stayed in all the programs, continued to do what I do. And I was able to keep my clearance to the point where I then, got adjudicated 5 years later, because every 5 years I have to get adjudicated. And what that means is that I have to go back through screening process. And so basically I have to relive not only my whole military career, I have to relive this whole event to somebody that has no clue about mental health. Now that process is a lot harder, as I've learned and worked with organizations, is those people that come and do the clearance stuff are not trained on mental health. They are trained to ask you those 800 freaking questions on the paperwork, but they are not anywhere trained to handle somebody that wants to talk about mental health and actually answers honestly on there. Luckily, I'm in a place where I'm confident. I tell my story all around the world, and I'm confident in talking straight to somebody about it. But I could definitely see where a specialist, somebody that doesn't have a support system, or somebody that is very held to their job, that is a very specialty job, would be fearful to talk to some of these people, because I saw when they actually had a book hiding under my paperwork because they had no clue what questions to ask me. And when I was straight up honest with them, they had to go up 2 levels of people because they didn't know what to do with me being honest. And to include some of the questions that I answered honestly, they came back and sat there and asked me, they told me, no, that's not what you're supposed to say. I'm like, no, that's what I'm supposed to say. Well, no, that really didn't happen that way. Well, yes, it did. And so, and it went back and forth that way. And I don't fault anybody. I don't, but it is a learning process for them. And I try to educate those people now. And then there are, programs within the Army and the DOD that make it more difficult, right? The government, we're still trying to figure this out. That report comes out and it's no different than any report we've seen every year, right? But there's always a rise where we're still in having this, and DOD and them are still trying to do the best they can by finding any program, right? We've had ASSIST, we have ACE through the chaplains. They're now on QPR. We've got MRT. We've got tons of programs out there, right? And they're trying to find one that's going to fit. And I don't think we can really find one that fits 100%, 100 of the time, right? I'm glad that they're continuing to try to find programs and they're trying to work through. I really believe I am a product of, if you try really hard and you really do have a supportive leadership and the stars do align, that I am very fortunate. I know, and I truly understand that I am one of the 1%ers, which is why I go around and try to tell my story, to encourage others to go ahead and make that call. And when I do go make these calls, I don't only talk to the privates and some, I make sure that their leadership is in the front row, because I want to pinpoint that to their leadership. That I'm not here because your leadership got me to come out here to UI. I'm here because I'm educating your leadership on how to help you better and get you the help that you need. And so that's kind of one of one of my pinpoints of whenever I go do talks is, it's not to the soldiers, it's mainly to the leadership, to, hey, this is what you need to do to make your soldiers comfortable to be able to come to you. Or when they do decide on their own to go down that hallway to sit there and get help, that you don't sit there and, criticize them, hold it against them, or instead you embrace them and go, you know what, that is very strong of you. I greatly appreciate you. Because nowadays you can put that stuff on an evaluation, on an NCOER and OER. Those are bullets. If you sit there and self-refer yourself and you go through programs and you go through treatments, that is actually a good thing that can be used as a bullet on your records to show you took the initiative to go get that help. So not many people know that or know that, but it's actually in the regulation to be, you can do that.
Okay, so just before I get there, because I definitely want to get to Enrique first, but I want also for the Lakita House, Have you ever experienced, okay, you got a soldier or you're an airman or whatever that says, hey, I'm thinking about suicide. And have you ever seen that kind of situation, and how did it pan out?
I have just recently had somebody had the same issue. Actually, it's her second time going back. When she sought help, the first thing they did was, because you are a cop or whatever, they take your gun away. And then they had her doing other duties outside of that. So I seen how it affected her, because it was like nobody was there to listen. It was more like, oh, you're weak, just figure it out. We'll be there for you if you really need us. But nobody was really there for her. And I think the big thing, we have this phrase that we're supposed to ask questions and make sure we, it's called ACE, we're supposed to ask, and of course supposed to escort and do all these things, but nobody was doing that for her. Nobody's checking in on her and things like that. So I've talked to her a few times, and actually I'm outside of her leadership. I was the one of the people that recruited her. So I've talked to her when she was at the point where she was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore because nobody's helping me. So we were able to get her help at a facility here in Texas, and now she's seeking help there. But it was just the way, when people do ask, it's the way you are treated when you do ask for help. And, she was at the point where, she was done. She had nobody there. But again, like what Tom says, it's all about leadership. We got to take care of each other. So it just depends on, how you take care of people. And the best thing we have to do as leaders is to make sure that we're actually not just checking boxes. We're actually sitting there and helping our people and guiding them to have, to seek the help they need, so yeah.
And Enrique, and I would like you to also comment about what they just said too, about what you saw as far as the shame as well. But and then you can finish off with, okay, I'm sorry, somebody in that command have died by suicide. Now you're contacted. That part too, that that walking from that part as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tony, for having me and to share. Yeah, I totally and wholeheartedly agree with Tom and Lakidra on their assessment of what actually happens, because they're living it, right? They're active duty. I'll tell you from my perspective that it is like that. The most important thing you need to have is leadership that understands that life happens. Life happens, and life happens differently for different people at different levels. And you may be getting someone in service, right? We don't know all of the backgrounds when we recruit. We try to do a very thorough assessment of the recruit that we're bringing in. Not everything is as evident. It could go back to childhood for all we know. It could happen in service, right? There are a lot of stressors in service that people don't understand outside of service. Just a basic working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've seen that. You go to a hot, what they call a hot rack. You jump in a rack, get 2 or 3 hours sleep, turn around, try to eat something, wash up, and get back on watch. It's like that. And so continual pressure like that, some people just cannot bear for too long. And when you have a leadership that's poised and ready to support their people, those things get addressed at the right level. So leadership has to be educated. And so, when Tom talks about, hey, I go speak to the leadership, that's exactly what he needs to do, right? Because those are the deciders. That commander, that executive officer, and that senior enlisted, they all get together when these things come up. I was there, right? So we all get together and figure out what we're going to do, number one, for the sake of the service member. Now, when those three get together and they say what we need to do for the sake of the mission, they've already lost sight of what really is going on, right? So the very first question is, what do we need to do for this service member? And how can we do it efficiently where, number one, that person has the necessary backup and services that they need to get right. Then what are we going to do for our complement, the command? What, because this stuff gets out. You don't want it to get out, but it gets out because sometimes it happens at the barracks, sometimes it happens on watch. So some things just you can't control. Now these things are held very private. If the command is up to speed on the regulations and how they're supposed to proceed with these things, they're held very delicately. But you can't control what's out. So what do we do about the group, the command? Because we have to educate them to not see this as a negative, so that then that service member can come back to the command and not feel a bump. I mean, and anybody, and it doesn't only have to be with suicide. Anything that happens to a service member, if they come back to a command and it's open arms and we got you, you could, guess what? All right, cool, you got me, and the service member is right back to speed. Because now they're surrounded by nothing but love and compassion and understanding. You'd be surprised what happens. Then they actually become a spokesperson, like Tom. They surpass that stage in life, that thing that happened, that event, and they become a spokesperson. And I would love nothing more for a service member to come back and say, hey, this is real. This happens. I overcame. I was supported by a great command and a great commander and a great command master chief, command sergeant major, chief, and I survived, and look at me, right? Which is, Tom's story, which I really appreciate. But that command has to have that education, has to have that mentality, because unfortunately, there are some commands that don't have the education or mentality or want to deal with a situation like this, because it slows down their mission, and their mission is tied to their rank. You gotta be real. You gotta be real, right? So all of those things come to play. But I was fortunate. I served as the command suicide prevention coordinator, so I had that experience. And unfortunately, I had also the duty after someone is successful, right? Because you got ideations, you got attempts, and then you got actual suicide, right? So unfortunately, I was on that side as well, and I got to see the ugly piece of an act, like that. So yeah, and we could talk about that here in a minute.
We definitely going to talk about it, because that's an important part, and that's also the prevention part. So as Enrique is talking about, as we know, the leadership has a critical, important role in this. And then, then at the same time, as you said, as we all mentioned, even me as an officer, I still got to look at how's it going to affect my rating as well. So those things you got to balance. So I want to talk about, I want you guys to jump in, and we'll start with Tom, and then we'll talk to the rest of the group. But can suicide, if is there still a stigma about suicide, that if I think about suicide, or if I get submitted, that it's going to ruin my career? Is that stigma still there, and is it real? And you know what? I'll start with Lakita first. Is that stigma still real? And give us an example.
Definitely, it is still real, and it's even affecting, us as me and other people that along the way in their career, like the newer airmen. It is still real, and again, we get misplaced and we get mistreated, and when I went and talked about my issues, I lost a lot of friends from it, because I was one of those, hard speed charging airmen. Everybody was like, yeah, Houston, you can contact her. She's going to go out and do, search and rescue, whatever she needs to do, I'm saying, as a cop. So I was always that go-getter. So when I fell back in that depression stage and went through something traumatic in my life, it was like, oh, we can't rely on her. She's really, you know, nobody, you know what I'm saying? So it was a stigma. So I thought it was wrong to seek help. And I felt like it was wrong, and I felt like I was very weak, and I was treated as such. So then I kind of see why people, and I'm not trying to say this to, you know, be rude or anything, but I kind of see why people do it, because when you don't have that good core foundation or that good support system, you're alone. You know, you don't have anybody. So yes, there's a huge stigma that if you do seek help, that you're weak. And it's still prevalent as we speak on, you know, Facebook. They have groups that talk about it, suicide issues, you know. So yes, it is. It's the stigma still there, and I don't think it's going to go away for a long time.
And let's talk to Tom. You know, Tom obviously being an E8 and stuff. So what is your thoughts on what, you know, that you've seen? Is you know, admitting that you think about suicide, is that a stigma?
Oh yeah, basically everything she said is true, right? You know, and to go back 1 second. So when we talk about like the leadership, how your favorite saying is, you know, it's a local solution to the problem. That's where it comes at, is like the command, right? You got to be able to deal with the command, but then you got to get that to filter down. Like I can talk to 4-stars all day long, and I can talk to generals, and I can talk to captains and stuff, but if that stuff doesn't get filtered down to the platoon sergeant, where really it is, down that part, down to the soldier, talking to leadership it doesn't make a difference. You can get buy-in from them all day long, because of course they're going to buy in. But yes, there's a stigma still, and that's one of my biggest pushes is why I try to do what we do. Is you know, me being a master sergeant, me being with 25 years in, me being you know, when I tell our story, we tell our story with me, my wife, and my son, and that's how we tell our story, because I tell it from a military aspect, because I'm very, you know, detailed. My wife now gets up, and because she's the one that saved our lives, and the reason why I'm here and she's here, she tells it from the spouse, and she has empathy and affection. And then we have our son come up there, and we tell it from that point of view, that, you know, you can have a future, right? So we try to, and when I talk to them, you know, the students, I try to, or the people, I try to tell them, you know, I have a divorce, my wife has a divorce, I've been through the mental health, I've got 6 deployments, I've got 7 kids, I've got, you know, anything that they can come through, I pretty much have been through it in 25 years, right? And so I try to get to their level of where I try to build their confidence in me to come talk to me, right? Because there is a stigma. There is more people like Lakita and myself that need to be out there. We need to be, you know, my 2 big things is peer mentoring and lived experience, right? Storytelling is huge, right? How many suicide prevention PowerPoints have I been through or the choose a direction, you know, choose this one or that one, and I blew them all off, right? Again, I have 6 deployments, so I've been through all those pre-deployments and all that stuff, and answered the sheet and never got answered, to the point where I just did a PHA and told them straight up, hey, yeah, I still have ideations, I still have the thoughts, and they just kind of, whoop, okay, cool, we finished the PDHA. I was like, is that really what we're supposed to be doing? But you know, it's going to be there, but people that are strong and within the recovery part, right? That's the big deal. You've got to be past and in the recovery and in a comfortable place with yourself, because there are tons, like there are tons of people out there want to help. Everybody wants to help and be a solution, but they're not ready. What you end up causing is more issues for yourself and then for the one you're trying to help. So we really, the Army, DOD organizations really need to base their people off us lived experience people that are in a safe place, and kind of do what the VA does and do the peer-to-peer mentoring program. I think they need to bring that to the active duty side instead of just the veteran side, and have a roaming team of Lakidras and me, basically be a traveling team for DOD. You bring an ODA guy, you bring an SF guy in there, right? You bring a police officer, and you bring, you know, a normal support Joe like me, and then you try to find some privates, and you get 5 to 10 people, and you do a traveling show with them. I guarantee you would make a big difference in the stigmas, because there is one, and there's not enough of Lakidras and myself right now that go around and tell our story and are comfortable telling it and sharing and voicing our opinion, and not really worrying about what other people are going to think about us, because we're past that point. Because there are still people that, you know, unfortunately, this does hinder their jobs. You know, their jobs are still, if I go get help, I'm done. I'm looked at. I can't help. I can't get the, you know, and I still feel that way for myself. You know, I think it definitely has stopped why I haven't been promoted, since the incident. Why it's held me back on some other things possibly, but I just think this is more my calling, to be more vocal and try to stand up for that private that won't or can't stand up for himself. Because me as a master sergeant with 25 years in, not much you can do to me. So if I can be as loud as I can for that private, I'd be more than glad to tell, anybody. And you can ask my people that work with me now. They know how vocal I am about just about everything. Again, it goes back to the huge stigma, and we need more people like Lakita and I to go out and be those voices for those people that don't have a command that cares for them.
Now, Enrique, I wanted to get you to about, you were just having a conversation, you being a casualty assistance call officer. Can you give a sense of how many of those? I say how many. What's the percentage you think of those calls were for suicide?
I would say that at least half of the cases that I had to face or deal with were suicide, and you see a blip, an uptick on in situations where many deployments, no rest, divorces that went bad, actual, let's say, criminal activity, and you got and you got caught. It just happened right a couple of weeks ago, right, or a week ago.
Yeah, a week ago.
That individual was a service member.
Yeah,
and so you have to count it, right? It becomes part of the statistic for a service member. Although we may say, oh man, that was a criminal, yeah, it's still service member suicide. That's how it's gonna go down, right? Unfortunately, we do a real good job to take care of the service member and make sure that they're safe in terms of their jobs, but we don't do too good of a job in making sure they're safe mentally. And I do leadership development on the outside now, and one of the points that I try to make with CEOs, leaders, executives is, are you creating a mentally safe environment in your workplace? Mm-hmm. And they all look at me like, what that got to do with leadership? And I'm like, it has everything to do with leadership. And so I address it out here, with leadership. So what we see is that these events, right? Because that's these events in people's lives, and I would dare say, if anybody ever said that they didn't feel so bad that they were like, man, why is it worth to be here anyway? If anybody has never said something like that, I don't know, you must have a very, very nice life where there's nothing going on, because there are stressors at every corner. And sometimes you wonder if it's even, worth going through that. So, the thoughts of pressures getting on you, that's something that it happens, and everybody has several triggers. You don't necessarily have to go from the thought to the ideation to the attempt. You don't have to necessarily go to that, but they pace it out that way because people think like that. But back to the stigma, Lakita said, we may not be getting to get out of that anytime soon. If you ask me, we'll never get to that point, because as long as there are people that have to think for you, they won't think like you. And so I don't think we will ever be at a point where the stigma will be pushed away as if it never happened. There's always people. You mentioned Tony, at the commander level, you're worried about your promotion. How's this gonna affect my mission which, oh, by the way, affects my promotion, right? Yeah. If I can't get my unit out there where that general, let's say you're a colonel, that general says, Tony, you're up, let's go. And you say, I'm sorry, General, I can't go. I'm not at 75% capacity as is required on doctrine for my unit to go, because I'm missing 2 people. They're being treated for suicide. There's a lot to think about. And so some people, as long as there's some people that are more concerned about them and their mission and their promotion, it's gonna be a challenge, right? And if you ask me, right, I will follow the leader that puts his promotion on the line for one person. That's the leader I'm about to follow, because you think about, oh, it's my retirement, it's my this and that and the other. That's the leader you want to follow, where they say, you know what, I don't care. I'm here for my soldier. I'm here for my airman. I'm here for my Coast Guardman. I'm here for my sailor, my Marine. I'm here for them. And if it costs me my job, hey, so be it. But you're not gonna get that.
You said you actually practice that with your company, Triad Solutions. You actually
the Triad Leadership Solutions, right?
Yes, you actually use that as a module. Now, I could tell you as a commander, it's a two-way hit, because if I was to stand to say, hey, sir, I can't continue mission because I got 2 people who may have been thinking about suicide. Well, I get hit twice. First, I can't complete the mission. Then I got 2 people who are messed up in my command. So I get hit both ways. I got to explain why. And do I have 2 soldiers who are, what am I doing wrong? What are you doing wrong, Commander, that they're thinking like that? So, I gotta take a step back from. It's not all about promotion. It's about, the key thing for us is about the mission. When you're out there and you're in war, whatever war, OAF, you trying to get the mission there. You ain't think about promotion. You want to make sure that whoever you go out there are ready, fit and ready. And I'm just saying that. So not all things about I want to get promoted. So I'm gonna overlook that soldier or sailor because he's gonna not get promoted. Lakita, one thing I was interested about is and he had mentioned about when he has to sit there and get the message out. We kind of talked about it last week too. How have you seen that affect when somebody dies by suicide? How have you seen that affect the morale of the unit?
There's good and bad with that. Usually I see, a lot of people struggle with it, because certainly somebody they know, that know them, they kind of struggle with it. And it's like a dark cloud on us for like the next probably few months. With my friend who committed suicide, was on duty. So every time we drove by the gate shack, it was just a heavy feeling, and it was something heavy that came over us. So it does mess with us. And when you see, one person go through that, then you're thinking, maybe that's the move I should make. Maybe I should commit suicide because I see that one person doing that, and they, wanted help, and they were this fun-loving person. This was a guy who you just want to hang out with and everything. And when he did that, it was just like, hey, this guy had his life together. We really didn't understand what he was going through internally, but we thought that he had his life together. So now you're thinking, hey, when a situation happens to me, you get into a dark cloud and like, man, maybe that is the option for me. I don't know if that makes sense to some people, but that's what I've seen within a unit. It's kind of like we're all like, man, maybe this is the way out. And then you will have a chaplain come talk to you, and it seemed like boxes were just being checked. It was more like, hey, if you have suicide, call me, contact me, have a good day, and that's it. So I've seen it affect that way, and I've also seen it affect where some people are like, oh, he was weak anyway, or saying negative things about it and not taking it serious, and taking that time maybe to reflect on, maybe we need to take care of each other more. So I've seen it happen in both ways. But I remember Enrique said something about mission, and I always have this mindset when I became a leader, because as a master sergeant, I've seen things at different level, at different views. But I always say, what is the foundation of the mission? Your people, right? So we have to take care of our people to make sure the mission gets done correctly. So that's one thing I always tell everybody. But yeah, I've seen it affect, us in different ways. Sorry, I just kind of jumped on there real quick.
Well, okay. And Tom, and have you seen it? Have you seen when somebody has committed suicide, how does that affect the rest of the guys and ladies?
So coming from, you know, the spec op side of the house and stuff, it is very detrimental because those teams have been around, you know, together for many years. Usually those guys don't transfer out of their units, you know, very often or at all. They usually stay in one or two spots the whole time their careers. And so when a hit takes to them, and if they're a 12-man team, that's a huge hit because they're families, right? We used to joke around, like I spend more time with my battle buddy than I did with my actual, you know, my ex-wife, because I was down range more with them, and then I would come back and I'd go back out to training to be able to go back down range, and so when it takes a hit like that, it really can mess up the dynamics of a team, and then really make the team reflect though too, like what sometimes it makes the team stronger. Like, okay, what did we miss? And then it comes like, you know, everyone in a circle, and how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What do we need to do to make us stronger? And then that kind of goes back to the leadership, right? You'll always get those couple people in the group or in there be like, well, he was weak anyways, or he was going through these issues, and you know, it can't happen to me because I don't have these issues. And what people don't understand is if you look in the news lately, it doesn't matter, or the news whenever, it doesn't matter who it is. You know, the most recent one for us in the intel world, that's a heavy hit. You know, for senior peoples, you know, when people see a senior NCO or a senior officer or a senior happen, just like Lakita said, it makes people think, well, because we're looked at like at the leadership highest, like, oh, well, you got all this money, you got all this leadership, you got all this freedom, and okay, your life is great, and then my life already sucks. And then if you see a leader do it, those younger people are traumatized because they're like, well, if he has that perfect life that I think he has, and all of a sudden he doesn't, and I think my life already isn't worth living, it can really mess up a dynamic of a unit and a grouping, because they may figure that to be a way out. And that's what we needed, you know, the leadership to step in, and the leadership to embrace quickly after an event like that, and bring the people in and embrace and say, you know what, and just be transparent. That's one of my biggest issues, and one of my biggest things with me is transparency. You can ask me, and I always challenge the audiences, ask me anything you want to ask me. I'm an open book. I have nothing to hide. I will tell you my things that you probably don't want to know, just because if I can relate to one person out there that has that same feeling maybe, or a similar feeling, that was like, oh crap, you tell me he's done this, and you know, he's a mass sergeant, you know, all this time and been deployed, blah, but he's like me, you know, he really is just like me, and he really does have issues. Maybe that one will come and talk to me and be like, hey, you know, I have a drinking problem, or, you know, I have, you know, 7 kids too, or I'm thinking about getting a divorce, or, you know what, I'm scared about a deployment, or, you know, something like that. It's all about building that dynamics of that team. So when an event happens like that, it's really about transparency, and in the military is horrible about transparency on suicides. And I think they try to do that for multiple other reasons, but I really go back to, with the lived experience and the peer mentoring, if they were more transparent about why, or how, not how, but why, and how we're going to maybe possibly prevent the next one, because we're never going to really prevent them all, but how we can try to prevent them, I think they would get a lot more buy-in by just saying it's under investigation. Like, come on, everyone already knows, you know, just let's be honest. Let's if we're going to stop the stigma, if we're going to move forward, let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. The guy was going through this. It was a rough time. You know, no one's to blame. You know, if it was a spousal issue, if it was a work issue, financial issue, let's put it out there so we can try to stop the next one.
Well, I got a question for you guys. So I'm a spouse, and I'm concerned. My husband or wife is starting to isolate. They're drinking more. They're saying that, you know, they bought some stuff for the weapon, for the gun, whatever. But I'm afraid, because I don't want to get him or her in trouble. Because I'm afraid if I say something, the command is going to die. What is your advice if you're a spouse and you're concerned that your husband or wife may be having suicidation? Who do you recommend that they go to? Start with Tom, and we'll start with Tom, and then we'll go down.
So usually when I give these briefings, I always look at the audience and I tell them, to find one person, because it was only one person that saved my life. You know, it was my fiance, which is my wife now. That's the only person that saved me. Otherwise, I had every reason and encouragement, not by their fault, but encouragement to do what I wanted to do. So now that I had my one, I always challenge people to have your one, right? And have that one that will back you up no matter what. Not give you the answer you want to hear, but back you up, right? And have that person on dial. It could be your spouse, it could be a best friend from home, it could be one of your colleagues, but somebody that you have in your Rolodex that you know you could call 24/7, 365 and say, you know what, I'm not feeling right now. And that person's going to give you honest feedback and give you the caring and and like I call it the hug, that, you know, they give you that hug that you want, but also put you in your place and be like, hey, I really think we should go, you know, stay on the line with me, but I'm going to call somebody. You've already worked this out, because it's, you know, if we are proactive about this, you've already got a safety plan in place. You've already got all this other stuff in place to way before these incidents even happen. And you already know who you can trust calling, right? Maybe I can call my chain of command, because right now, if you call my chain of command, I have a very supportive one. You know, so if my wife felt that I was that way, she knows she could call my sergeant major or my colonel, and they would not hold anything against me, right? So having that pre-talk and having all that in place before, instead of being in reaction mode, we're already proactive, then I think that would help a lot of this, where we would know where to turn, whether it be an organization, whether it be a pastor, a chaplain, another peer, Tony, you know, so anybody else that's out there, then in the reactive mode, where we only have a couple of choices, right? And that's the problem, is in reactive mode, you only got a couple of choices because it's split second. Most people are going to call the police, or they're going to call a hospital, because that's all they know, right? That's all they got. And right, wrong, or indifferent on that subject of what people think, when you're trying to just take care of somebody, sometimes that's all you got, you know? So that's some of the things we educate. I just educate being proactive and having at least one that, you know, always has your back.
Okay, Lakita, what is your advice if somebody, a spouse or somebody in a relationship, you know, they're concerned about somebody dying? So how would you recommend who they contact?
Tom basically Tom stole my thunder. No, I'm kidding. He basically said the same thing how I would feel. You know, of course, contact. I stand away from contacting chain of command right away. I always contact somebody that's a good friend of the family, things like that. But same thing he said. I don't want to repeat the same thing, but you know, definitely all of us have wingman. Everybody has, you know, that person that has your six. So definitely call that person. You know, and it should be something that, you know, you and your spouse talk about. So I agree with everything he said. There was nothing to add to that.
Okay, and how about you, Chief? How about you, Enrique?
No, I echo that, but I also want to make sure that I admonish leadership. You know, you know, it's funny because hearing Lakita say, "Yeah, I try to stay away from telling the command right quick," but you imagine, and this is something that I did as a senior enlisted. I indoctrinated the family. I just didn't indoctrinate the sailor. When they came in my command, the whole family got indoctrinated. That means the family knew exactly what that sailor knew. And so, because I always find that the information gets to the sailor but never makes it to the family. So I would bring them in. The same feeling of me telling a sailor, listen, if you find yourself in a position where it's so stressful, whatever it may be, either your personal life or your professional life here at the command, I want you to understand, and look at me, I want you to understand, here's my number. You call me 24/7. Anything you need, I can get, you know, because if they go to their peer, they don't have resources like I would. You know, I'll get on the phone and I have the entire Navy at my will. And so, you know, so I would make that plea right off the day one. so that they understand they're in an environment that is, mentally safe, physically safe, but that they can always reach out to with no questions asked. You could, you downtown Waikiki. That's where I was last time. You downtown Waikiki. You think it's, you can't make it and you don't know if you got enough? Give me a call. I'll get in my car. I'll go get you. We might have a talk on the way out, but I'm still going to come get you. I'm not going to leave you out there to Lord knows what, right? So I would share that with the family, and then the family would be more in tune with approaching at least myself, right? So and then I could talk my way up and down the chain, but I always provided myself as that point of contact for those situations that were kind of out of hand. It makes a huge impact, and it makes a huge difference. Now, let me tell you, I hardly ever got a call, ever, but they knew that at least their chain of command was supportive, and I represented the top three. When I spoke, I didn't speak for myself. I represented the top three. So it was a conversation we had to make sure that everybody understands that when you come to me, you got the full support of of the front office, and everybody follows suit. But it's important for the leadership to set that tone right from the beginning, so that they could feel comfortable, at least knowing, hey, at least I'm not going to get in trouble, and maybe they don't call you, but at least they know that they're not headed that way. And yeah, family, friends, proactive, like Tom said, is the key. And that's the reason why, the Navy started the suicide prevention coordinator's position. And I think it's DODY, but at least the Navy is the only one I had experience with. And we would be proactive. Everything was, thought of, ahead of time, with training and facilitating and sharing of information and encouragement to sailors to that there's a better way,
I appreciate that, but almost out of time. But I would like Tom to take a couple minutes to explain the difference of what's going on overseas. We had that conversation before. Like, what's the difference of if you're here in the United States and you're overseas and you're having this suicide and kind of stuff. So can you run down the differences between that?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I took coming over to Belgium was, one, to be able to come to Belgium and travel to Europe, but also two, doing the suicide prevention work. I pretty much know everywhere in the States how to take care of a soldier or veteran. I've proved it many times across the U.S. of how to availability to get them help. But what I also could have never helped was the soldiers that were overseas. I always found that difficult. Why? Now that I live here, I know why. Because there's not many resources for over here, right? I live in Belgium, and Belgium is, it's U.S. small, and we're in a SOFA, and really we're under Belgium. Everything gets handled by the Belgian laws. But also my guys travel all around Europe, right? We go on vacation in Bavaria, we go vacation in Spain, we go to Denmark. But where do they go if they have mental health issues, right? So if they have a breakdown on a trip, which, I've had multiple of my soldiers. Example is I had a soldier breakdown in Spain. And luckily he called me and said, Tom, I just got into an argument. I'm feeling bad and I'm thinking about harming myself, but let you know, I'm on my way to the hospital. I said, oh, that's awesome, man. Just, hey, stay on the phone with me. Let me know when you get to the hospital. But then I was like, oh crap. He's in Spain. He's going to an ER in Spain. If you know anything about Spain, Spain has a lot of issues within themselves, to the point where Spain won their independence, but then their government took their independence back and then jailed all those people that won the independence, right? So internally, they've got their own problems. But now I'm like, well, you're going to go into a facility in Spain, the language barrier, how they treat mental health. Not everybody treats mental health the same across the world, right? And so, and then even if he gets in there, the medication they give him, there's no such thing as FDAA and all that other. They may give him what they deem to calm him down if that issues, right? So, and my biggest worry wasn't Spain, right? And then how do I get him out of there? Like, what does it take for us to be able to even see him or get him or whatever, right? Yeah, he's an American soldier, and yeah, he had a DOD card, and we can do that stuff, but spouses and children. And what if this is, say we go to Croatia, like I've been to Croatia and some of those and some Eastern Bloc countries. What are their stances on that, right? And how do I even know where they're at and access to them? My daughter and my son, when we were in Croatia, got stung by a jellyfish, and that was a trip just to try to get them care for a sting by jellyfish, because the nearest hospital don't treat children. And so when they went in there, they were told to leave, even though they were stung. Luckily, the Airbnb person we were with knew a doctor in there, and they were able to get seen. But that's just another example of even just a jellyfish bite, to go in and get treated because her legs started to swell up. She wasn't supposed to go to that hospital. Well, if I got a mental health, which is even worse, how do I know where I'm allowed to go in some of these countries and how they're going to treat me? So that's one of my biggest challenges, is trying to educate and talking to DOD about, hey, what are we doing with our soldiers overseas? And there's a lot of good, like Objective Zero does some great work. A lot of Facebook groups are very supportive. Some of the 800 numbers for us don't work, right? If I'm going to call New York and call an 800 number, what are they going to tell me about Belgium or Croatia? Some of them may not even know where those are. So trying to get the help, and then, it depends how serious the situation is for them to be able to help me over here. Now, I've been to a couple international suicide conventions while I've been over here. There's one in Italy soon in September that may be going on. I went to one in Ireland. And so there are, each country has their own same resources, and the US is getting like 711 and some of the lifelines are coming over here finally, and work in conjunction with some of these countries. But that's one of my biggest fights with DOD, and each time I go to these conferences, to try to explain to them, what are you doing for us that are outside the US, that are in a danger zone, or that are in not only the Middle East or Europe or the Asias. What are they doing for people that are in like Guam or Thailand or some of South Korea and some of those others that we have people dispersed all over the world, and how do we help treat them in the event they have an issue, because some of them don't ever come back to the States. So that's one of my biggest challenges, and why I came over here, is try to help educate. And each of the facilities, US has facilities in like Landstuhl, and we have like Italy, and we have bases in them. But to get some of those bases, like for me to go to Landstuhl to see anything, because I have just a clinic here, but to me to go actually get medical help or something that I need more serious to go is Landstuhl. That's a 4.5 hour drive for me. So I had to take a buddy who, that same guy that was in Spain, had come back, and now I have to take him to Landstuhl. That's a 4-hour drive. By the time I get him there, I've already talked to him, and he's already not in the same state. So when he gets there, he's not suicidal. He's not actively. And the doctor was like, hey, so what you doing? It's like, well, I've already been talking to him for 4 hours plus, before. So a lot of big issues over here as far as how do we better provide quick, immediate assistance, not just long term. Long term, I think we can do. There's good facilities in a lot of these countries, but that quick, immediate, that reaction time, that crucial, couple hours, that's what I think we're not very equipped over here for.
Okay, so we're about getting real close to recording now. What I want you guys to do is, I want you to give me a 1-minute pitch on why, and you're talking to that person, that server out there who's thinking about suicide. I'll give you 1 minute to tell them why not to do it. And we'll start with Lakita.
I'm good at pitches. No, not really. But really, I would honestly tell everyone who is feeling that way, or in a feel like that's their last choice. You have to keep on continuously searching and getting help. Keep on, like, find that strength, whatever it is, whether it's family, something, find that strength, find that courage to keep on getting help. I always tell everybody, the world needs you. You're here for a purpose. We're all here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose. So continuously get the help. Even if you go to one person, they just not doing it for you, just keep on seeking help, and you're going to find it. And once you find it, you're going to be in a great spot where you're like, okay, I can pull myself through. I got this. And then now you can help other people as well. But I always tell everybody, we're here for a purpose. Everybody's here. So continue getting help. Do not give up. If you need people, reach out to me. Anybody else on here, Tom, whoever you need to find, Enrique, reach out to people and make sure, you know, we help you the best way we can. So.
All right, Enrique, you're on. 1 minute.
Yeah, I would say that the person who's listening and is feeling or thinking of doing themselves harm, that they don't understand the true value and the delicacy that was taken to create them for a purpose, you know, and you may not know that purpose now, but you'll never find out if this happens. And so give someone a call, give myself a call, the team a call, and we will help you through it, because that is not the end to all. And your troubles are temporary, but you can surpass them, and we're willing to help.
Thank you. And finally, Tom, 1 minute pitch.
All right, mine is longer than obviously 1 minute, but my main thing is I will just sit here and listen. That's all I'm here. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to, I know I can't solve your problems, right? But I will listen and I will offer assistance. I will offer advice. And then just like one of my pitches I usually say is, you know, I learned the hard way that I shouldn't have stopped at the first counselor, right? And counseling is just like marriage, right? You didn't date one person, marry them, and think that everything is great, right? And life's all done, right? You date people. Same thing with therapy. You're telling them your deepest, darkest secrets, right? So if you tried therapy and said it's not for me, keep trying. Like Lakita said, that you find the one that matches up with you and helps you and assists you. Now it gives you the answers you want, but works with you on getting to a right solution. And you know, contact one of us. We may or may not have the answers, but I guarantee we've got resources or personnel that we can help you, link you up with, and that we do care about you. And you know, we're all in this together.
I think I really appreciate that you guys being here, being my guests for talking about the active duty military suicide. Again, I want to thank Enrique, who graciously I found out through LinkedIn that this is one of his expertise areas. I want to thank you for your comments, Enrique. I want to thank you as well, Lakita, part of the tribe. I want to thank you too, Tom. And I'm really interested in talking about Enrique about what kind of thing he offers when in his CEO his job with the triad, right? The triad leadership solution. I'm curious about how do you address suicide in that leadership role? So that's interesting. I hope you keep it up. Until then, guys, I got a quick takeaway and then we'll go off. So what we've been talking for the last hour is about military suicide and the increase. And I wanted to get some insight from some active duty people who are part of it and understand what's going on with the soldiers, sailors, airmen out there, and sailors and coaches out there who are thinking about suicide. One of the things I always say, one of the greatest ways to stop somebody about suicide is think about who you're hurting when you leave. If you really want to understand why you don't do it, look at that person who now has to carry on that tragic why for the rest of their lives. Something Enrique knows about when he did his CACO. So think about that as well. And our next, we're going to do a special podcast coming up end of this week. We're going to sit there and actually have a really good cast to talk about what happened with Specialist Vanessa Gillum and her tragic murder that happened in Fort Hood. We're going to have a commander on who actually sit there and successfully court-martialed a senior NCO on sexual predators. We're going to have we're going to have Lakita on as well to come to talk to us about from the active duty side of the house when it comes to military sexual trauma, a couple experts in military sexual trauma, myself being a commander, so I can really kind of understand the process of when we talk about military sexual trauma and ways we can fix it. But also there are a lot of survivors out there who are hurting, who are confused about this whole thing. And we at Military Counts Veteran, we feel like we got to do something about it. So stay tuned for the episode or when it comes up. So until then, this is Tony Williams from Veterans Counseling Veteran, our podcast, Veteran Suicide, Local Solution. This is Tony Williams out.